Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the professor, and this is the moment of truth. You know, the more this trial goes on, I'm starting to think that the judge has some sort of terminal disease. Perhaps the doctors have told him that he's only got about 6 days to live. That's the only thing to me that would explain all of this completely ridiculous, over-the-top cheerleading and supporting of a killer that he's been doing. This judge is going overboard. I mean, just when you think that he's topped himself, he comes out and does something that you couldn't have foreseen. At this point, I'm expecting the judge to just hand Rittenhouse an AR-15 and tell him you can now kill the prosecutors. Up until now, that's about the only thing this corrupt scumbag presiding over this court case has done. So for those of you who didn't know, what's happened is there were 20 jurors in all, but you can't have but 12 on the jury, so at least 8 of them would be alternates. 2 of them were dismissed before now, and that left another 6 or so that had to go. So, as is the case, the judge decided, how do we deal with those remaining 6 jurors? How do we select who the 6 jurors who are going to be alternates are going to be? How do we select who's who? Now, typically what would happen is the clerk of court, who is the one who selects the jury pool that the jury is selected from, typically the clerk of court handles that. In fact, when the notorious killer Mark Jensen was put on trial in Judge Schroeder's courtroom, by the way, Judge Schroeder decided that when it was time to eliminate the alternate jurors, that he would have the clerk of court do it because that's how it's done. Oh, but for the first time, and that anyone can even think of, you got this guy, and this is the first time that anyone can even name. He says, well, I think that the defendant ought to do it. And you know that this is something that's so bizarre that even all of these so-called people who want to support Rittenhouse, you ask them, okay, can you name any other case where a defendant got to select the alternate jurors themselves? You ask the white supremacists, why is this judge handling this case differently than any other that he's had in his courtroom in 40 years that he's been on the bench? Oh, well, he's not handling this any differently. That's what they were saying before. And now all of a sudden what they're retreating to is, well, okay, maybe this is different. But you know, there's no law that says that he can't do it. That's the white supremacists for you. There are no laws for them. There are no principles. All they've got is moral relativism and situational ethics. I'm white and I say so. And keep in mind, it was a Democrat who put this corrupt, racist bastard Schroeder on the bench. It was a Democrat who appointed him to the bench. Now, in order to lend any suspension of disbelief to these obvious lies, the question is, why would the judge decide that the clerk of court shouldn't do it because he's handled cases like this before and it's always been the clerk of court who does it? Or why would the judge not do it himself? Well, the only explanation would be if the judge feels that perhaps he is somehow more biased than Kyle Rittenhouse, or perhaps he believes that Kyle Rittenhouse is less biased than he is. That's the only possible other answer there could be. We know what's normal for Judge Schroeder. He's never allowed a defendant to be the one who selects who the alternate jurors are. But in this case, for the first time at the end of his career, his felonious, notorious career, he decides that all of a sudden, after 40 some odd years on the bench, all of a sudden he feels, well, you know, today's the day. In this case in particular, I haven't done it before, haven't done it in decades, my entire career, my entire life. But today on this one, I'm going to do it differently on this one. So apparently he feels that after 40 years, where he has never done this even once, 40 years. How many people do something different one time in 40 years? What makes this one so special to the judge? Obviously, this is a special case to the judge. He thinks this one's special. And that being the case, what makes this one special to the judge? Apparently, all the other murder trials that Schroeder presided over, those weren't deserving of the defendant being allowed to handpick his own jury. But apparently in this one, he feels that this one's special. This one's different. In 40 years, he's never done this. But I'm supposed to think that there's nothing unusual about this when this is the very definition of unusual. An unbroken 40-year-long record of always having the clerk of court handle this part of the court proceedings. Many, if not most of you who happen to listen to me, you're not even 40 years old. This guy has been sitting on the bench thwarting justice for 4 decades longer than you've been alive. And yet here he is wanting you to believe that after 4 freaking decades of consistently handing this chore off to the clerk of court. Here he is on this one case in particular, and well, there's nothing different about me doing something unprecedented that's so unprecedented that everybody who's been asked about it, Wisconsin prosecutors and lawyers asked about it, said, we've never heard of this happening anywhere. So it's not just unprecedented for the corrupt Judge Schroeder, it's unprecedented for judges, period. Oh, but there's nothing going on here. Absolutely nothing biased at all going on here, right? He's not handling this case any differently than he's handled any other case that's come through his court, right? Isn't that what the white supremacists have been trying to falsely claim? Even they've been looking and going, hell, no one's dumb enough to believe that. At this point here, the judge has made it impossible for them to claim that he's handling this no differently than he would anything else. And now they're going to go, well, there's no law that says he can't do it. Yeah, so much for he's not handling this one any differently. But that's the entire point. This is a special case. This one's different than the others. I gotta handle this one differently. Oh, he's certainly been handling this one differently than any other judge ever. Now, in any other case, you would have every politician and you would have every person with a law degree screaming, this judge needs to be gotten off the bench immediately. The state bar disciplinary committee needs to be brought in. The state legislature needs to convene. The governor needs to weigh in on this. Well, if this was a black judge, and certainly if Rittenhouse was black and this was going on, that would be, you would have just front page. It would be all over the place. You would have everybody from Fox News to the New York Slimes, New York Times. You would have all of the white media going, oh my God, this is great. The system's out of control. This is racial deference to, this has just gone too far. But because the judge is white and the defendant's white, well, it's just another day in the life. Nothing to see here, folks. In the name of covering for white supremacy, it's not suspension of disbelief, it's suspension of common sense. That's what's going on here. The judge is going over the top with this, and that makes me think that maybe even at this late date, the judge is looking and going, God dang it, I haven't put my crusty, wrinkled hand on the scales of justice hard enough. To hell with it, just let Rittenhouse, I'm going to let Rittenhouse write down the jury verdict. That's what I'm going to do. This is how race war is conducted. This is how it's done. Because the audience that this judge is performing for happens to be what he hopes are the angry, maladjusted, completely psychotic, psychopathic racists out there. This is meant to be not even a dog whistle, but a foghorn to them. Hey guys, this is how you gotta be about it. It's gotta be blatant. We gotta show our blatant support for these race killers. And please don't play any games about, well, maybe somebody will pass a law. Let me tell you something. Laws only get passed whenever there's a black person who the criminal injustice system fails to snare. If there's a black person who they wanted and didn't get locked up, then all of a sudden here's going to come an orgy of laws. That's why I keep telling you, the laws weren't written to punish them, they were written to punish you. That's who they wrote the laws to go after black people. And that's exactly the pattern and practice of white supremacy, whether it's Democrats or Republicans. You're not going to see any Democrats anywhere running on a platform of, hey, here's a loophole in this underage firearm law where obviously somebody wanted for kids to be able to have firearms openly. We can't have that. Let's go ahead and make sure we plug that loophole, and let's strengthen the law to make sure that nobody even attempts to try to support it or to allow anyone to get away with it. That's not what's going to happen. Now, if Kyle Rittenhouse had been black, you would have had the Democrats sit on their hands and allow the Republicans to go ahead and pass some laws, and the NRA would be in there with them going, God dang it, these damn little black children running around with these guns. And no one's going to be passing any laws meant to punish corrupt judges like Schroeder for telling the court to applaud for defense witnesses, ordering we need to applaud these defense witnesses. Or to punish judges for illegally keeping out evidence that is clearly admissible, or for judges deciding that they're going to allow defendants to choose who gets to be on the jury even after the voir dire process is over. Don't expect to see any laws like that from either Democrats or Republicans, because it's only illegal if black people benefit from it. That's when they're going to look and say, well, now there needs to be a law. But I'm glad that this wrinkled up, crusty, no good white supremacist is pulling all this mess. I'm glad that he's decided that he's going to fly off this cliff with his flag, Confederate flag, no doubt, flying high. Because black folks need to see this. This is not about Kyle Rittenhouse in specific. This is about the white supremacist system that allowed this little animal to be able to roam the streets, allowed him to murder people, and is now flaunting in front of you that it intends to do everything it can to see him set free. White supremacy is on a war footing. The bad guys are organized and resourced, but most of all, they're focused. This is what they're focused on. Now, we have proven that we can harm these guys. We can put some pain on them. We can frustrate their efforts, and we can, in fact, defeat them if we are equally focused. That's where you come in. The white supremacists are a sick, vile, cowardly lot. Emphasis on the cowardly part. Kyle Rittenhouse wasn't out there because he thought that he was going to be facing opposition. He was out there because he thought he was going up against a bunch of unarmed people. That's the reason why he was out there. He was looking for soft targets. That's what these white supremacists do. You have a right and a duty to make sure that you are safe and that you have a right and a duty to secure your own safety. And that brings us to the sponsor of today's Moment of Truth, Power Tools. Oh yeah, when you got to put some work in, you make sure you carry those power tools. 'Cause you never know when you're going to need to drop the hammer. You never know when something's going to need to get drilled. And of course, you've probably heard of the company in Germany that makes chainsaws and such, Stihl, S-T-I-H-L, that's how it's pronounced, Stihl. Well, you know what? That works for me. Always carry your Stihl. Power tools. Stay ready. That way you don't have to get ready. Because no matter how this verdict shakes out, the white supremacists have already gotten the message that they need to go on the offensive heavy. And that means make sure that any one of these white supremacists, no matter their age, are going to be recruited into the race war. That's the message being sent. White media is sending it through their deliberate, persistent silence. And of course, we ain't got to talk about the administrative arm of white supremacy, the politicians. The propaganda arm is well spoken for. And of course, the police, they were out there cheering Rittenhouse on. As far as they were concerned, this is what we have the irregular forces like him around for. This is not about law or order. As you can see, they're already showing what they think about the law. The only law is I'm white and I say so. Order? No order, just white supremacist control. Oh, as the bad guys see it, they've taken everything into account, but the one thing that they haven't taken into account is you. The white supremacists figured that black folks would just take it on the chin forever, and then came the uprisings of 2020. Literally overnight, these thugs with badges, these white supremacist criminals, they went from having their knee on a black person's neck to being on their knees. Overnight. And it didn't take any laws being passed to do it. Didn't take any Supreme Court rulings or any judges issuing any edicts to do it either. It was done completely and thoroughly by the will of the people. And that is what white supremacy is scared of. People standing up for themselves. Black people standing up for themselves. They simply didn't think that would ever happen. And they're rolling the dice and they're taking a bet. They're gambling this time. We're going all in. That's what Schroeder's saying. We're going all in on this one. We don't know what the outcome's going to be. We're going all in, though. I don't think they got the stomach for the long haul on this. No, they don't. White supremacy's fighting for its survival. And they're looking at the trend and going, man, the trend overall is showing that we're losing ground. Oh, they started off thinking to themselves that they were just running the boards. Oh, yeah, after Zimmerman was let loose and after Betty Shelby and such, oh, they thought they were onto something. Then came the murder of Walter Scott, Laquan McDonald, that came back to the surface, Amber Geiger, and Derek Chauvin. Now the white supremacists are going, man, we've gone from running the boards to we can't win for nothing. Those juries, we used to be able to depend on them to bury cases. But now what's happening is the juries are in revolt. That's what happened with Breonna Taylor. You had that corrupt state attorney general Cameron, that scumbag. He's sitting there saying, oh, the grand jury agree with me. The grand jurors say, we're going to sue you so we can talk. He said, no, don't worry. I'll do the talking for you. We know you agree with me. As soon as the grand jurors talk, they say, we totally disagree with him. He lied. He was like, oh, God dang it. You grand jurors, you guys will be quiet for a reason, you know. Yeah, you can't depend on the juries to cover for you. And as a result, the prosecutors having pressure put on them. Instead of them being able to give excuses, now they got to give indictments. So we are disarming them of their usual bag of tricks. And white supremacy doesn't have a ton of tricks because they've never needed a ton of tricks. When you got black folks who are not fighting back or not organizing to do so and not putting the arm on white supremacy, why do they need to have a ton of plays and a ton of moves? No, just the same one or two will do. You don't have to innovate because it's not as if you're facing opposition. And so we got the judges, and we saw this in the trial of the murderers of Laquan McDonald. You saw the judges going overboard, especially that woman who was presiding over the case of the fellow murderers who aided and abetted in the murder of Laquan McDonald, deciding, we're just going to go ahead and throw out any sort of verdict. There's nothing here. Yeah, the judges are making it clear. They understand that they're part of that last line of defense for the thugs in blue. The enforcement arm of white supremacy is going to be broken once we break them. And that being the case, a lot of them are concerned. It's like, hell, if you guys are sitting here going after the cops, and you're also putting pressure on the DAs. Hell, these judges, they're like, we were neck deep in the racism and corruption too. How long before you guys decide that we need to go to jail? How long before you decide we need to be punished? Oh yeah, they got put on notice. You had black folks who were staring down the police and pulling up. No more of this protesting and marching in front of City Hall. They're showing you, man, we'll protest in front of your house. We'll give you a side of civil disruption with your cornflakes. Oh, and for all you white supremacist trash out there, there's no law that says you can't protest in front of someone's house. There's no law that says you can't. And that being the case, why is it that you are not championing people's right to free speech? Because it's not about free speech. It's about white supremacist speech. And white supremacist speech is not speech at all. It's nothing more than a prelude to violence. So you got people actually exercising a right to free speech. You got the white supremacists saying, we got to shut this down. Why? You don't even have to say anything. Football players, baseball players, basketball players taking a knee, they're not saying anything. And you got the white supremacists saying somebody needs to stop them. Yeah, we know what free speech means to these fools. And as the pressure mounts, as these guys face more and more L's, expect their behavior to become even more violent. The best example of this trend that I can point to is Kyle Rittenhouse himself. On July 1st, 2020, that was the date that Rittenhouse decided that he was going to attack some of his female classmates, attacking little girls. That was on July 1st, 2020. But do you recall how that violent altercation that he started ended? It didn't end until a couple of black teenagers decided to stomp his behind. Oh yeah, you had another white supremacist who found out that, the black kids, they got your number, had you cold. And what did Rittenhouse do? Well, we know exactly what he did. 2 weeks before he went on his mass shooting, mass murder spree, he was caught on video saying, look at those protesters. I wish I had my effing AR-15. I'd shoot rounds at them. That was 2 weeks before the mass shooting. Oh yeah, that's why Rittenhouse was spending all of his time thinking about those Black Lives Matter protesters. Because you had two law-abiding black citizens who stomped a mud hole in his behind because he was being typically violent and out of control. So Rittenhouse, you know that got to him. He was, well, whenever I'm at the gun range with the other white supremacists who I keep telling I want to be a cop, and the other cops say I'll fit right in because I'm a racist piece of crap and I'm not worth anything, so I'll fit right in the department. And I was going to show that girl who was boss, and then these black guys, they just came out of nowhere. I took my little manhood. That's, you know that he was sitting there the whole time seething, just seething for weeks. If I had my AR-15, he wasn't thinking about no protesters. He was thinking about those brothers who put him in his place. So 2 weeks later, he decided, well, I see a chance. I know where there's going to be some black people. I didn't have an AR-15 when I was beating up those schoolgirls, but I'll have an AR-15 this time. And I'm going to find out where I know that there's some black people. There's going to be some black people protesting the murder of Jacob Blake Good. That's where I'm going. 30 miles from home. I don't care. It could be on the other side of the country. I'm going. And I'm bringing my AR-15 because this time I'm going to go shoot me some niggers this time. Oh, they're not going to humiliate me again. That's why Kyle Rittenhouse went on his mass murder spree. He wanted to be a nice little race soldier for white supremacy. What he found out was the brother stomped a mud hole in him. They sent that soldier back to camp with a bunch of bruises and wounds. He was like, dang, my first battle, I got my butt kicked. Yeah, you see Rittenhouse and all these other little white supremacist Call of Duty commandos. Yeah, it's easy to imagine that you're killing black guys when you're playing Xbox Live or PlayStation Network or whatever. When you try to do it in the real world, you find that all those black men are a hell of a lot harder to kill. Especially when you ain't got an AR-15. It's a matter of, hey, if he's got a gun and you got one, then that's an even fight. But if he doesn't have one and you don't have one, then all of a sudden you ain't just taking an L, you're taking an LOSS. So I recite that timeline from last year just to make the point that in a little under 2 months, Rittenhouse had already made up his decision before he went to Kenosha that he was going to be killing some people. He had already made up his mind on that. He didn't just decide that on August 25th. He made the decision on July 1st of last year. He made his decision there when them brothers went ahead and stopped his little violent rampage that day. He made up his mind, I'm going to kill me some niggers. If I had my AR-15, bro. He was just ruminating on that. He was just obsessing over it every day. Those guys kicked my behind. It was on video too, and everybody saw me get stomped. I'll show those niggers. That's what happened in Kenosha. That's who Kyle Rittenhouse is, but you ain't heard the white media tell you this. No, as far as they're concerned, these are just random events. But they're not. They never are. Elliot Rodgers, there's another little white supremacist who was humiliated simply because the black men would go to the parties and the white women were all over them. And he's like, but I'm white. Actually, he was biracial. He was half Asian. But he figured that his white daddy got him a BMW. I guess he figured if I'm driving a car, these females going to be flocking after me because they're going to figure to me that I'm a come up. Isn't that the way, all you got to do is just show me you got a little bit of money, or at least you know somebody who does. Money don't mean nothing to a female if you lack the masculinity. That's how you got dudes who ain't got 2 nickels to rub together, but the females are flocking all over them because they can sense those superior genes. Meanwhile, you got Elliot Rodgers sitting here looking like freaking Where's Waldo, but I got a BMW though, man. That BMW that's not the kind of thing that makes the females go, ooh, I got to get with this. So Elliot Rodgers went on a shooting spree because some black men made him feel inferior. And the same thing goes for Dylan Roof. After the police took him to lunch at Burger King, he was asked by the FBI about why it was that he didn't just, if he was angry at black men, why didn't he go try to take them on? He said, well, in the hood, they've got guns, and they've got guns in the hood. The white supremacist is a coward. Dylan Roof, Elliot Rodgers, Kyle Rittenhouse, all these angry young white men who are looking at a world that they were brought up to believe was made for them and that they were exceptional, and what they found out was, nah, you're the bottom of the barrel. You're the weakest link, and it would take barely a stiff breeze to blow you away. As far as they were concerned, I've got to prove my little white manhood. My white fragility has been exposed. And that's what brings about all this white supremacist violence. So you be ready to make sure you defend yourself. Because for the white supremacists, they always believe in taking both sides of the argument. When you see these white supremacists start getting locked up, they're going, oh, we're on a rampage, we're going to kill, you're locking us all up and we're not going to have it. On the other hand, if these guys win, woo, we're on a roll, guys. Let's go ahead and show them that we're going to up the ante. We're going to even commit even more brazen kills. Kyle Rittenhouse, just like Elliot Rodgers, just like Dylan Roof, he would never have pulled that stunt if he thought that he was actually going up against folks who were ready and able to protect themselves right then and there. That's the reason why he was walking up and down the streets. He was looking to see who's a soft target. You have a right to your safety, but it is also going to be your responsibility to ensure that safety. No one's going to ensure it for you. You are under absolutely no obligation to be a walking target for Kyle Rittenhouse or any other half-cocked white supremacist piece of trash who thinks that they're going to be making a victim out of you. You have a right to self-defense, and in our fight to crush white supremacy, we have an obligation to stand up for those who stand up for themselves. Good day, and be one.